So asset protection. This is probably my favorite topic when it comes to planning. It's the thing that's closest and dearest to my heart. A lot of folks don't really know what it is. If you go and you were to Google, asset protection, loss prevention, things like that, a lot of times you're going to get those jobs and things that come up are like, the security guards at Walmart or Target and places that are going to prevent people from doing shoplifting. Well, asset protection isn't that. It's basically about setting up your assets so that whether it's a lawsuit, whether it's an accident, whether it's theft or anything like that, that you won't be able to lose it. It's about preserving that little base level of wealth. And I'm very passionate about this piece of planning. It goes well with estate planning and business succession planning and exit planning, everything they come together because at its heart, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to preserve families, preserve that wealth of things that people have accomplished over their life and pass it on. That sometimes isn't always just money and things. It could be your family values. It could be keeping the family together, period. And this is not a practice area that a lot of lawyers practice, and it's even more difficult to see folks who actually practice it well and often. And it's a big part of my journey. When I first got out of law school and started practicing, it was right after 2007 and 8, right? It was the height of the financial crisis. And, like a lot of people, I was pretty idealistic in law school. I went there, I wanted to help people. I thought about everything from criminal defense to family law and things like that. But jobs weren't exactly prevalent at that time, so I knew I was going to go out on my own, and I ended up working for businesses and the wealthy, and it was that time where everything was kind of falling down around them. Fortunes were being made, fortunes were being lost, people were kind of in a panic, and one of my jobs was to then go and when deals and things broke up, try to pick up the pieces. If that meant I had to go take it from someone through a seizure or a levy or something like that, that's what I did. And for a lot of times, when it's people who are sophisticated businesses and things like that, it's just kind of a part of doing business. You know what I mean? They make contracts and they make deals and they sit down when things go bad, just like corporations sit down and decide to lay folks off. They sit down and decide, which contracts am I going to keep and which contracts am I going to break? Which ones can I do without? Can I bring them to the negotiating table because no one really wants to go through lawsuits and litigation and get into that messiness? And so I was a part of that, and I was really good at it. I would go and find things, and sometimes companies and things would play games, and they would hide the assets, and I'd have to go find them, and then we'd seize them, and we'd collect them, and people would negotiate. But really, no one lost everything. And that really started to change quite a bit as the financial crisis went on. I remember one Monday morning I was sitting in my office and I got up pretty early. I was in the office at 6 in the morning and it was a Monday. And the phone rang and I didn't expect the phone to ring. I just reached over and grabbed it and was really curious about who would be calling at 6 in the morning. And then all I heard was the person on the line say, "Your client's in a really strong position." And it took me a moment to kind of recognize who it was, and I recognized it was an attorney for one of the companies that we had to go seize property back from. I had hit one of their accounts, and the attorney said, you hit their operating account, and over the weekend, their payroll and all of their checks to their vendors and everything bounced. Can we talk about this? And I just sat there silently for a few minutes because I hadn't really even checked the mail or any of the memos that came from the secretary. And I looked quickly over at my desk, and sure enough, when I went after the assets, I caught them on their payday, and we took $100,000. So now there were probably hundreds of families out there who didn't get their paycheck over the weekend and might not get their paychecks until this dispute is over with. And the vendors and everything didn't get a lot of their pay too. I mean, that's real money. And they were looking at a big judgment. They were looking at that big contract, but they were, I just assumed they were like the rest of the companies and they were going to do some negotiating, and it was one of those deals. But that's kind of the first time where I looked at it and, I realized, this hurts people quite a bit. And it's not just those faceless companies and corporations. Sometimes these companies don't have that money for that. And the crisis really hurt folks. These were businesses that had typically had millions of dollars in there. And because of the depth of the crisis, now we were down to maybe their last 100,000. And that really started me thinking, and I thought back a lot to the other folks that were there. And a lot of times when I went after assets and things, all of it wouldn't be exposed. It was kind of like a game. Can't get me here, can't get me there, can't get me there. Where can you get it? And whoever found something to get, that's what put the pressure up, and that's what brought them to the table to settle. But as the crisis went on, things got more serious and things got in further depth. And I remembered that situation, and my clients, and they worked it out because they were bigger businesses. But that was some real damage, and it made me first time start to doubt, exactly where I was in the practice of law and where I was going with it. And the crisis, it went on for a while and it deepened even more. And I think probably the time where I decided to make a change was later. And I got another phone call, and I picked it up, and it wasn't pleasant. I didn't like hearing on the other line, and it was someone, and they were kind of sobbing. I could hear them kind of choking back a little bit, and they'd asked to talk to me, and they wanted to work things out, and I talked to them a little bit more, and it turned out she was a single mother. And sometimes when we would send legal notices out and we would send out other things, it would take a little while for things to get processed and for things to actually happen. And this had happened on this occasion, and it took a few weeks for her bank and things to process some of the paperwork. And now it was the middle of the second week of October, and she wanted to make a deal because she couldn't buy her kids' school supplies. She couldn't buy her daughter clothing. And she kept saying, she couldn't work something out. Her kid would have to go to school without shoes, with those same shoes she probably had last year. And this hit me kind of the most. I've got 4 kids myself, and when my sons had asked me, what I do for a living and things like that, they were too young to kind of understand lawyers. They were too young to understand how those disputes kind of go. But the one thing I didn't want to tell them is, Daddy, he destroys wealth. Daddy, he takes people's money. It's supposed to be Daddy protects people. Daddy protects, even if it's a corporation. I protected the corporations from bad deals and things, but now it really had spilled over into Main Street, and it was affecting people. And I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. Some of the times, there were wealthy folks, but they were neighbors, and whether it was their tenants or their customers and things like that, for the most part they were companies. But now they were real people, and I was really good at my job. I was in intelligence in the military, so I really learned how to go find assets and push paper around, and it was that function. And we need things like that in society. We need companies to be able to enforce agreements, and there are people that hide things and do that. But even though I was good at that, I thought I could be a lot better. I could do a lot more good if I protected wealth and I helped families stay together and help them keep their businesses together and healthy and pass that legacy on. That is a result that I could be much more proud of and could talk to my children about, regardless of the economic necessity of it and regardless of how good I was at it. And so even though I was making quite a bit of money with that, I thought, I really want to do something that protects and helps people more than that other piece. So I came over and I started to do asset protection, and that's kind of what that's about. It's about when things go wrong, you've got that base level of wealth that you've accrued up that you don't want to lose. It's about never going back to zero. It's about never going broke. It's about knowing that when you're going out there in life and you're in business and you're taking that risk, you don't have to put all those chips in again. You can take some of that stuff off the table. And when you take some of that stuff off the table, you have that security. You know that you're that if the bad things happen, or worse comes to worse, you can still take care of your family. Bankruptcy is not on the horizon, and that's really become my passion. And that's how we protect when we pass things on to generation. That's how I protect your businesses and help your businesses grow and help you develop those systems. That's how I protect your assets with it. That's how I talk to you about your family and the struggles that they're going to do and go through outside of in business, and how they can communicate and set those processes up and work together as a team. It's about building things rather than just stopping them from falling apart or being a part of that. And that's what is most important to me, and that's kind of why I do this. And that's really what asset protection is. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.